Once a month, something happens that just is absolutely delightful. And it's that really strong jobs reports seem to come out consistently under Joe Biden's presidency. And because of that, Fox News and Fox Business, they're in the business of making anything about Biden's presidency seem horrible, including good economic metrics. And so you have this funny tension where Fox Business specifically is supposed to hype up good jobs reports like what we're about to see. But of course, their other job in their mind is to never make anything seem good under Joe Biden. And so that tension exists and you can see it and it's hilarious. And so a bunch of people every month comment on the fact that their favorite part of the month is seeing Fox hosts have to report on this good jobs market that we're seeing stay very strong. Now, we'll have a lot in this segment to look at. I want to start with a Biden-Harris HQ video that was put together where they put sad music and a little filter over some clips of individuals on Fox Business having to report on the March jobs report, where we found out that 303, I think it was, but you'll hear the particular number here, 1,000 jobs were added to the economy, better than expected, as so often has been the case again during Biden's presidency. Here it is, and we'll discuss further.
Stronger than expected. Headline number for March, 303,000 jobs added in the month of March. The expectation was 200,000.
It's a good number, no question.
Well, it's a good number, but is it too good for rate cuts? If the economy's on fire like this and we got 303,000 jobs in the month of March, jobs are plentiful with 303,000 jobs created in the month of March.
And so the caption when the Biden-Harris HQ account posted this was, "We're sorry this is happening to you, Fox News," which is how it seems. And do you notice how quickly Maria Bartiromo added onto her sentence? It's good, but is it too good for rate cuts? There's always a caveat. There has to be. And we've covered stories where Fox and Friends will discuss a good economic story, but it has to then immediately transition into, but here's a particular anecdote that's bad about the economic situation, which, as I often say, and I'll say this caveat of my own before we go any further in this segment, discussing good economic metrics or good crime plummets that we've seen is never to invalidate anyone's experiences, because there is still a ton of economic pain. There's still crimes that are happening. And so I want to make that clear every time. It's that we want that pain to be minimized. And the way we do that is try to figure out if these metrics are going in the right direction. Could it be because of some particular policies? And then can we maximize for the variables creating these steps in the right direction so that we have more steps in the right direction, right? And so a big, simple answer is, if we want things to keep going in the direction they're going, and if we're honest about the metrics on numerous issues, the economy being one of them, the metrics are going in the right direction broadly on the economy, then naturally America would rationally choose the current president to stay president so these things can keep happening and more pain can be minimized. So that's what we're advocating for here. And we're celebrating the successes without ignoring where more needs to be done. So then here's the non-edited version of this initially breaking on Fox Business.
March jobs report is crossing the tape right now. Lauren Simonetti with the breaking news. Lauren.
Stronger than expected. Headline number for March, 303,000 jobs added in the month of March. The expectation was...
I'm going to really quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button plus the like button as well and the alert bell so you get notifications. Back to it.
200,000. Revisions. February revised down by 5,000 to 270,000. Unemployment rate unexpectedly drops from 3.9%, which was a two-year high, to 3.
Did you notice her say 2-year high, 3.9%? Unemployment has been so low that 3.9 was a 2-year high because it's stayed below 4% for 2 years, which is remarkable.
8%. Immediate reaction in the market. Maria, I am seeing futures moving a little bit higher, and that's all I'm getting at the moment. I'm trying to get my rates, but they're stronger than expected at the surface report. I'll continue to dive in to get you some of the wages and the other stuff, Maria.
Yeah, well, look, we're looking at a market that is up, but off of the highs, okay? We're losing steam, and we're losing steam fast. The March jobs report out.
You see that? Immediately. Now I guess the stock market isn't breaking records enough. And of course, you can't have the sort of days we've been having with the stock market every single day. That's remarkable. Or that would be absurd and unheard of. And so there always has to be a quick transition to the caveat, to the negative, and that's how they package these. You know how people say if you have a critique for someone, it should be in a compliment sandwich? At least someone who you're worried about maybe being a little bit sensitive, and you say something positive. Hey, you're so great at this that maybe what you could work on is this, since you're so great at this. Okay. And here they do a negative sandwich. So the positive news has to come in between two negative things about the economic situation, or if they ever were to report, on the crime plummets that we've seen, they would have to put that in between two anecdotes that are just vicious and horrible about particular crimes that have happened. As crimes happen, they're horrible, but that doesn't take away from the successes of crime rate plummets. Now, the unemployment rate here, as Steven Rattner is pointing out on X, has remained below 4% for 26 consecutive months, which is the longest that it's remained sub 4% since the late 1960s. And you can see there, the orange line that you're seeing on this visual is portraying what the average unemployment rate was in between 2017 and 2019. So while Trump was president before the pandemic crisis. And so it's remained lower for 26 consecutive months than the average before this whole crisis under Trump. So better than Trump, even though Biden didn't get handed a already strong economy that was already heading in the right direction, like Trump got handed to him. No, Biden had to inherit this crisis that his predecessor was mishandling in a pretty horrific fashion. Then you have this visual that shows the job growth we've seen, and again, constantly outperforming the job growth that we were even experiencing before the pandemic crisis. And I've talked about how, yes, the job growth was remarkable as we recovered, but some of that you'd say is expected since we lost a bunch of jobs because of the pandemic. That would come back. Well, even after we recovered all of the pre-pandemic jobs, job growth has remained stronger than it was even before this crisis. But will Biden get credit? Nope, never. And Chris Hayes pointed out a really interesting chart from the Wall Street Journal. And he said, I think this chart definitely resolves the vibecession, like recession, but vibecession debate. And what he means is, while these traditional metrics we use, unemployment, wage growth, job growth, stock market, etc., are looking pretty good. Really good, actually. People are saying in surveys the opposite. And a lot of people feel like there's a disastrous economic situation going on. And so there's been a question about why is it that it seems like people are saying they feel like we're in a recession when we're in a booming economy. And so what this Wall Street Journal poll is showing is that when you ask the question, has the U.S. economy, your state's economy, gotten better or worse in the last 2 years, net share answering better, U.S. economy is in the negatives. So people are saying disproportionately the economy has gotten worse in the last 2 years, which according to the metrics, just not even close to true. But then people in their individual states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, the swing states is why they're interested in these, because those will decide the election. People are saying their economy has gotten better. Isn't that so fascinating? Nationwide, your perception of the nationwide economy is a lot more narrative driven because you can't really know what's going on economically across the country other than your media and the sources you get your information from. And so people are saying, yeah, nationwide things are going horrible. But then in the swing states, disproportionately people are saying things have gotten better in the last 2 years economically. Isn't that really fascinating? Which means close to home, where it matters, people are saying actually things are getting better. And obviously things have gotten better. 2 years ago, we were in still recovery mode from this disastrous public health, economic, and social crisis. One of the largest spikes in homicides in 2020 under Donald Trump, granted because of pandemic-related conditions in large part. But then Biden came into office. The economy was in shambles. The social situation was horrific, including crime. Of course, he still had to get the pandemic under control. And then just a few years later, boom, things are as they currently are. Now, because I've brought up crime over and over again, I'll show you a visual on this one. Just every single year, violent crime has been dropping under Joe Biden. And right now, it's at near 50-year lows, which is pretty incredible. One other random visual, thank you to Steven Rattner for posting all of these, the total domestic energy production, just because it's such a talking point that Biden's crushed energy production, is higher than it's ever been in the United States. And oil production in particular is higher in the United States right now than any other country and any other country in the history of humanity. So people pretending like Biden has crushed oil production or energy production at large is a little bit goofy. Now, I do want to say two things and get to sort of the important point at the end of this. But before I get to that, the first thing is, I don't like when people downplay how much this matters. And what I mean by that, everything we've gone over, is people like to respond when you're having sort of a data-driven conversation about all these different subjects, the economy, crime, energy production, etc. And they like to wave it away, being like, oh my gosh, you're just trying to say to all the people saying things aren't good, yes it is, look, data, everything's fine. As I said earlier, that's not what we're doing. But actually, to Fox hosts, for example, you're the one advocating for a world where less pain is minimized for people. Because do you know how we solve these problems? We have to understand what works and what is working. And so if you don't look at the data and don't notice these trends and don't notice the impact of policies on these different things, then you're going to miss when there are, as I said earlier, variables you should be maximizing for. One of the variables is we should leave in office the president who's currently there. But others are, for example, more democratic, demand side economics. Clearly, time and time again, has shown to be more effective in growing the economy in a way that doesn't just benefit the top of the economic ladder than the supply side trickle down sort of economics. And so if you can't look at the data on these things and you can't then act accordingly, then you can't be as effective in making people's lives better. And so trying to wave away these very real statistical phenomena, that is in the interest of more pain existing or less progress being made. Because we need to figure out what's going on in reality, not just anecdotally, and what is the broader trend on these different subjects, and then act accordingly. And so that's super important to be said. But also, if things really are, as we observe these metrics, getting a whole heck of a lot better under Joe Biden, why is it that people aren't reflecting that in their approval of him? And why is it that people aren't reflecting that in their polling about the economy, about crime? Most people think crime spiking when it's plummeting, about energy production. Well, I do think, as I talked about with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna in our recent interview, that it has to do with post-pandemic grief and post-pandemic material outcomes. So you have the very real material impact of the pandemic that it just naturally, as we're seeing across the world, was going to take a long time to get over. These spikes in prices because of supply chain issues and everything that happened during the pandemic, and the social factors that were put into motion because of the pandemic. And so you have these material outcomes that we're going to take a while to deal with. And so people are blaming those, because he's currently the president, on Biden, when in reality it's not because of his governance. And actually he's been making these a lot better in his governance. But then number two, the question has to be asked, why? If things really are getting better on a lot of different fronts, why are people not reflecting that in the polling about Joe Biden, in their approval of him, or their polling about the economy, etc.? And I think it has to do with the pandemic. I really do. Some of it's just the sheer propaganda from the right, but some of it is the aftermath of the pandemic was painful and is painful. And pretending like just a few years later, the catastrophe that was is going to be gone in our experience of life is silly. It's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. And so what we're witnessing now, and we talked about a really good Atlantic piece that looked at this from the perspective of psychologists, is post-pandemic material grief and repercussions, and emotional grief and repercussions because of the pandemic. And so the material, obvious spikes in prices on things because of all the factors relating to the pandemic, this economic crash that took place, the social disaster, crime spiking. And so that's all still being dealt with, and it just took so long to deal with all those issues. And of course, as the Biden administration, Democrats attempted to do so, no one seemed to notice. But then you also have emotional grief, and that is sitting with people, understandably so. So then who do we direct that at? The current president, even though the story of his presidency more so has to do with getting us out of that than being to blame for it. But it's hard to distinguish between that for a lot of people, understandably. And I actually asked Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna about this in my recent interview with him, and he's big on advocating for this. Let's contextualize the story of Biden's presidency within the important context, which is the pandemic that we seem to try to omit from our timeline because of the pain. But if we do that, we miss the mark on understanding what's happened in the last few years. So here is that part of our conversation. One of the topics sort of connected to this is I've heard you talk about, and one of the things I just recently covered extensively was how sort of COVID grief is playing into people's perception of Biden's presidency. And there was an Atlantic piece that was really interesting from psychologists who were taking that sort of approach and saying a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the negative feelings about Biden's presidency come from this understandable remaining grief and pain from the pandemic and all the conditions that it spiraled out of control. Do you think, as we go into this election, it's strategically important to remind people of that context of what things were like as Trump left and Biden took over? And how do you think we message on that?
Yes, I think this gets to the heart of the issue about the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Most of us, at least Democrats, think, of course we are. We don't have to worry and wake up every morning about seeing what crazy tweet Donald Trump's going to be putting out, and worry about the human rights of immigrants in this country, worry about the rights and human rights and dignity of women, worry about some crazy policy that's going to provoke a possible conflict. But there is one sense, I think, when people who are Republicans or independents say, "Oh, we prefer 4 years ago," I think they're thinking of a time prior to COVID. And the reality is, of course, Donald Trump's leadership during COVID was disastrous. That's why he lost. And we need to remind people of that, not the sort of pre-COVID days, but okay, Donald Trump was president right when COVID hit. We had hundreds of thousands of people die. We had the unemployment rate go through the roof. And then it started to come down, but it was really President Biden who got the public health situation under control, who got the unemployment rate under control with the American Rescue Plan, and who started to get inflation under control with his policies. And I do think that there is this grief that we went through with COVID. There is this hardship of economic times we went through. And we need to say, look, contrast how Trump and Biden handle that in making your decision going forward.
By the way, if you do want to watch that full interview with Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna, you can watch it here. It was a great interview, and I will talk to you in the next video.